precise way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I'm at a point now where I've done a bit of work doing the more the kind of the opus, the crazy paving type of
Yeah.
approach, and want to kind of master the adamento kind of a approach and more classic.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of building up to that, towards kind of doing that. I'm not confident. I'm not a confident in drawing.
Yeah.
And as a result, kind of a lot of I've kind of tended to use my daughter, who's pretty good at art, to kind
Yeah.
of to draw my design when, from my instructions,
Yeah.
so that I can kind of feel a bit more confident with the outcome of my projects.
Yeah.
Or I've traced, say from my laptop, I've kind of got a picture up on my laptop and I've traced over it.
Yeah.
And when I'm doing kind of some of the smaller pieces or building
Yeah.
up on pieces. So that's pretty much where I'm at. So I'm kind of wanting to fine tune and neaten up the work that I do, and become more skilled, really, more craftsman,
Yeah.
really, in my in kind of I want to kind of do more of it. It's probably the only medium of art that I've ever done that I
Yeah.
felt I've really thoroughly enjoyed it, and felt that actually I can produce something that looks good,
Yeah.
without necessarily being able to draw, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. 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 That's the joy of mosaic work, is
Yeah.
you can get quite competent, quite good, quite quickly, as opposed to painting.
Yes.
But
Yes.
then it is just sort of a repetition, in a way, for you to be able to look at what you're doing, look at, trying to understand the sort of effects that you get, and why you like those and why you don't like those, and going forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Absolutely.
Just Marlene, thank you for appearing. Let's just see if I can unmute you. Marlene, I was just explaining to Helen that this is a completely new sort of format for me, because where it's sort of stretching over a month, it's not that important. That it's you don't need to be in here the whole month. You can come in for this, and then go, and everything else will be sent to you. But it's trying to sort of go into things in depth, almost in a way for my benefit as well, because although I've done this for 22 years, the teaching effectively is still a different. It's something that's always improved, like mosaic work. It's like I can always do that. So I'm now recording this session. You'll get the summary of this and the other things that I mentioned, the other downloads. But putting it in a group like this means that you can ask questions. You're not going to get lost in the sort of the other main group, which I'm now starting to do more in. And that means that you can get focused in on that I may have missed, that you've got questions about, and then I can answer them a lot faster. So there will be dates for things going up. There might be some more people coming in who have already brought the workbooks previously on here, and then they'll be able to see this recording here. So any questions at all, please just sort of stop and ask me. What I was saying to Helena was just asking what sort of stage she was at, what she's seeing when she looks at Mosaic, and what you're wanting to get out of this session. So, wondering, sort of, Marlene, what's your is it Marlene or Marlena?
Marlene.
Marlene. Yeah, what you're looking to get out of this training.
Well, I've just come across this technique, learning about the Roman principles, I guess. I took a class, or I'm taking a class from Helen Miles.
Yeah.
And that's where I found your name through her. And so I just wanted to further what I could learn.
Yeah.
With it.
Yeah. Great. Okay then. Yeah. So the the main one thing from this is I want you to view Roman mosaics. I want you to view those mosaics differently, and how you can understand how you can use that in your own work. Because at the moment, 99.9% of people will see these mosaics and they will look from this. They will look from the surface onto the mosaic. So they're seeing the colours, the lots of little stones, the what the iconography means, what all the figures are, the myths. What I want to do is sort of reverse that and start seeing from the bottom out, starting seeing from the creator's point of view. And once you do that, once you see it in that way, the other side of it is, I wouldn't say it's irrelevant, but it's just not as important, because you will look at these mosaics, you look at them, and you are trying to figure out what they were doing, how they were working, and
Mm.
a lot of other things like that, but purely from the point of view of these artisans that created them. So, um, let's go over just briefly, and mainly this is sort of listening to me jabber on.
Okay.
This is why what I've done is I've given you the Drawing Roman Mosaics manual, and that just as a download, and that means that in other sessions and that and at home, you're able to quite quickly get some uh, get the feel of them by just sort of looking at
Leave
them
those
and
strips.
drawing, and it's something that you can do very quickly. And drawing the andamento, in my mind, replicates the actual doing of it, and using tesserae, that is something that is faster but still just as effective. So if you draw them there, you can not have to wait until you've got the workshop, wait until you've got the equipment if you have an idea for it. So now we talk about andamento, and this was a post recently on my, I think it was on the Instagram, and andamento really is the flow of the mosaic. So we talk about classical andamento, and classical andamento is using tesserae of all the same size, all the same average size, and then the application of the six rules. Now, to my mind, and this is something that I've had some discussions with, that is what makes a Roman mosaic. It's not about what it's about. It's not about the materials they use. It's not about even when they were made. This transition from a Roman mosaic to a mosaic that uses classical andamento. Classical andamento takes all the time out of it. But if we look at when the why the why of they started, if you think 5th century BC, when mosaics were starting, you have draw it in here. Greek pebble mosaics, and this really was the start. Sorry, I managed to drop my ring light. Now, doing this shape, I'm just using pebbles. So, what you get with that, if you can see that clearly enough, I'm literally just filling it. I'm filling the gaps with it. Now, pebbles are all round, so they have a very smooth surface. They have a very smooth look. Now, when we look at something, we're naturally looking at flow, and this goes back 2.5 million years. That we do not like discordancy. We like things to look in place. If you think of around the sort of Neolithic period, earlier than that, we're looking for symmetry. We're looking for consistency. So you have it's determined that if somebody has a symmetrical face, they are more attractive than someone who doesn't. So it's just something that's innate in us, and we really can't get away from it. So with these, with the visual aspect of pebble mosaics, where they're just filling the gaps, but because the pebbles are all round, visually speaking, there's no discordancy. Our eye can travel easily over the design, and there's nothing to interrupt the flow. Now we get on to the 3rd century BC, and they are starting to use cut stone. The reason for that seems to have been, obviously, cut stone is much easier to get, it's much easier to work. You have a much greater range of colors. In a pebble mosaic, you got black, white, red, yellow, orange, and that's about it. Now, once they started looking and they were finding these different color stones, it made so much of a difference to their work because it opened up so many options. But just take these. When you cut stone, you start to get triangle shapes there that are needed to fill areas. Now, so we're just talking about filling the areas. This creates a discordancy. So visually speaking, we have this discordancy there. It interrupts the flow as we see it, and the brain doesn't like that disruption. So what they did was, at that time, 3rd century BC, we're starting to see the rules. If you look at a Greek pebble mosaic, and you won't see them once you have. I'll put these in the download for these, which is the crib card for the rules, which has them all in, and they're in pretty much every one of the manuals as well. So they had this discordancy. They thought we didn't want that. Now the why again is our brain doesn't like that. And also, you have, if you think of Greek architecture, you think of what we term as classical architecture. Classical architecture, these temples with all these columns, they were set to a certain ratio. They were constructed to a certain proportion, a certain geometry, which was pleasing to the eye. So you have classical architecture. My contention is, we know the rules started. We know we went from pebbles to cut stone, and we know when we went to cut stone that we start to see these 6 rules being used. So classical andamento, classical flow of the mosaic, to me means this application, the implementation of these 6 rules that actually made things more visually flowing for them. And that is why they created that, and that is why they used that. So you have just 6 rules. Where did I learn these? I first learned them when I first started training in Ravenna, and they're the bedrock of all the training. I know when we went there, you would do classical mosaic, and then you would do a modern piece. Everybody at the school started on classical, started on a Roman mosaic, and that was it. There was no there was no negotiation on that. I remember one time I was there, we had a gentleman who was already a professional mosaic artist, and he didn't see why he should this copy of a Roman mosaic, because he was already a professional. He was already been doing it. So that didn't get him anywhere. And in the end, he had to give in. He was given no choice. The reason for that is this classical andamento gives you a way of seeing. It's not just the act of doing the mosaic, but it's more what you see. So what you see dictates about what you do. So I can teach, you can learn the rules and you can just apply them in a mosaic. But if you're not really seeing them in the original ones, then you're not getting the full benefit of them. So we have that use of these rules, and one of the main things is it avoids a point of focus. So let's have a look at one of the main ones, and we're sort of jumping ahead, but as an illustration, and this is the last one of the list, and you'll find out why. So this is my wonderful drawing of somebody's arm and a bit of their shoulder, and someone thought it was a bit of intestine, so I obviously should have added the hand on the end of it. Now, if we look at this, there's your bit of your arm. There's the bicep. There's going into the forearm. This is the side. Now, we need background to that. We need background for that. And if we put in, there's our background. Now, you see what I just did there? It wasn't straight, still isn't. Therefore, without thinking about it, I had to straighten up. Why? Because we're looking for that symmetry. Try to see all the ways that you do these things, where you do something a little bit extra and you just doing it to make things neat, to make things appear correct. But that's so it's something that is always with us. So if we see here, now it might not be too clear on yours, but I will show you, as these horizontal lines meet the diagonal of that color change, you've got to cut triangle pieces. You've got to cut triangle. So there you can see there are triangle shapes. This creates a sharp line. Now, underneath the arm, where we've got a diagonal line and a vertical line, you can see on this that we have triangle cuts there to fill it, but on the side, it's just square tesserae. We don't need to cut them. So what you have, visually speaking, you have a sharp line there. You have a sharp line here, but here is a soft line. So sharp, sharp, soft. Now, that creates a discordancy in it. So what they would do, and this is the basis, is they would put that borderline in. Now, can you see how the triangles are pushed into the background? They're pushed away. And with that bottom piece, the borderline is with the square areas with the vertical and the diagonal as well, because it's easier. So they have this borderline all the way around, which is pushing these triangle cuts into the background. This is one of the main ones. The borderline is the easiest to see. So what we'll do, let's just go through them one by one. Now, the mosaicists themselves, from what we know, they were uneducated freemen. A lot of them would have been slaves as well. You would have had varying degrees of skill. So they know that they realised they needed this fluidity in the work, but they also needed to be able to have a system that, in a way that they were able to give to anyone, that were able to have anyone use. And so these sort of 6 rules are very easy to apply. How well they are, how well they're applied, is really just down to the actual standard of work. So we have Sorry, I can get my pen. We have size. Now, they're all hand cutting their materials. If they could have, they would have had machines and they would have cut square tesserae for them, but they had the slaves, so they would cut the material and they would have an average size that they worked to, which was about 10 mil, 3/8 of an inch. That's like your standard size. There are some variations, but we won't go into that for the moment. So you're going to be using, mostly you're going to be using machine cut tesserae. So that's easy enough. Your sizes are all going to be the same, but what you need to do is to ensure that you don't have pieces that are too small. So on this one that I have here, you can see on this side here, I have the black square and the red square is showing my maximum size. So if I hand cutting, I'm using 10 mil, 3/8 of an inch. I wouldn't want to go over about 12 mil along any one side. And on the other side there, you can see the red small square. That would be my smallest size that I want to go to. So I'm keeping the same average size. Now, what you will get with using square cut tesserae, the problems will occur if you're using tesserae that are too small with it. That's the main point. Again, we're trying to avoid this point of focus. So if you have tesserae like that, and then right next to it, you have one like that, that would create the contrast, and that might be something that draws in the eye. This is very much where you have to determine what is too large and too small for you, how far you're willing to go to adjust them. But that is the size. Next one is spacing. I spelt that right? Yeah, that will help. Okay. Spacing, that's really down to you. And you when I first started, I would teach, when I first started teaching, I would say, oh, you need a gap of 1 to 2 mil between each one, which isn't really correct. If you have an exact gap, you work to that takes too long. Okay, you're taking up a lot of time. When you look at a Roman mosaic and look at the spacing is quite varied in them. Some touch, some don't, but they keep a fairly consistent range of spacing in the same way as they keep a consistent range of size. So it's about the speed as well. Now, when we talk speed, we're not talking about fasts, but we're talking about rate of work. So you just want to be able to put the stuff down, because tesserae do not make the mosaic. The lines make the mosaic, and it is forming these lines that is the most important thing. So you want to be able to put them down, but you might not want an exact gap all the way around them. Now, a little bit of a tip for you: when you're using square tesserae, imagine if these were all the same size, just adjust them a little bit, tiny little bit, and break this sort of very exact straight line. We had, when I was doing the large villa mosaics, we were having to use a graphic design company that printed off all the patterns, and the problem with that was they were all very exact and they were all very precise. So we were using hand cut materials, and I was constantly going around telling people to soften the lines. So rather than following that printed off graphic that they had, what I wanted them was to just adjust things slightly, which softens the lines. anytime you get very strict, very straight lines, you get this regularity, you get that exact, you get a very flat surface on there. So when you're setting your lines, keep your spacing, but maybe just adjust them a little just to soften that and take off these straight lines. Now, if you have no spaces, that's fine. It just means you've got a lot of cutting to do. That's that extra time. If you have gaps that are too wide, then from point of view of the floor, the grout will wear down. There's more chance of tesserae being kicked up and coming off the floor. So you want that happy medium in there. You do see quite a number of Roman mosaics where the spacing is pretty tight on them. But again, that will be sort of style, the particular style that you have. So you have your size. You're avoiding these small tesserae on there, which is your main concern. You have your spacing, which is just not too wide, not too narrow, depending on how much cutting you want to do. Now, if we get onto a curve, so we have we've created our single lines. We now have to do a curve. When you open that up to follow the curve, what shape do you get in the gaps? You get a triangle shape. Now, if you fill those with triangles, get another. Artistically speaking, this breaks the flow of the line. The triangles break the flow of the line. Eye needs to be able to follow. Sorry, I've got my battery. I'm going to have to run off in a minute and get that lead. But so you have that. So can you all see this all right? Can you all see this? Because my screen's gone a little bit dark. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, then. Yeah, so
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah. So what they did was they open up the gap a little bit more and put in the keystone shape. So your keystone shape, where you have, it's the base that's important on the side of this. That allows the line to flow. That allows your eye to follow the line. And what you want to avoid, though, exaggerate that, is a half keystone. It's easy, it's quicker to do, but you see your eye will flow in one direction. That assumes a direction, and it can be that way. Sometimes it's that way. So a half keystone is quicker to do. It does the same thing as a full keystone, but it can lead the eye in one direction. Now, should say these are all small things, but they build up over time. They actually make that. They make the whole. They create the whole effect. So it's small details, but you tend to be working in a smaller mosaics. You're not doing full floors, but these details can add up. And what you need to be doing, your goal is to work without thinking. Your goal is to not just be focused on everything. So therefore, these small things, you want to make sure that you are actually doing them properly, for want of a better word, and then you can come back a little bit. You can be a little bit more relaxed. But initially, when you start, what you want to do is be quite correct in everything. So we have size, we have spacing, and we have a keystone rule. Now, single line, a single line going into multiple lines, part of that design. So you have something like that. There's your line. Now it's going to an area where there are two lines. There's going to be space for two lines. Obviously that will disrupt that. That doesn't work. Now, if you continued with one line, you then add a triangle there and continue with your other line. Again, this disrupts the flow. A triangle at the end of the line denotes the line is ending, the line is finishing. But we have the same color, which is always just in the same color. Two lines going into one line going into two, works either way. But you see here, this is saying that this line is finishing when it actually isn't. The line is continuing into one or expanding into two. The triangle there disrupts it. So what they would do then is they would have a slightly smaller tesserae, and then going into, I'll take this out there. This is a little bit off. Let's have that. This is going to be easy. Right here, and I've got tesserae. They're about 2/3, but I'm going back to the full size. This is known as convergence. This is known as or line transition. You can use whichever one you like, but it's two lines going to one line goes into two. If you're going up to three lines, 1, 2, 3, and they will continue until they are back at this full size again. So it flows. So it really is just keeping away from that, just adding a triangle in, adding a line on there. So now we have line transition. We have our size, we've got the right spacing. We're using keystones when they go onto a curve. We're using line transition where we're going into multiple lines. Now we have multiple lines, we need something called offset. So if you have multiple lines and you have them all over each other, you have them all lined up like the tiles in your bathroom, you will get this effect. You will have vertical, what we term grout lines, and you will have horizontal grout lines. Now, this creates a very flat, very two-dimensional effect. So you'd imagine if you have this, particularly in, say, background around a figure, this will create a very flat effect where you are wanting more of a three-dimensional one. So this, if we use this again, so this offsetting there creates a sense of depth to it. So that is offset. Now, we have the size, we have the spacing, we have our single lines. That line curves, we're using a keystone. When we are going into a larger area of the design from one, we have a line transition which takes us from one line up to 2 to 3 and takes us down the same way. We have multiple lines now, so we need to offset them. All of these give us the ability to start creating shapes. Human figures, animals, geometric shapes. Now, this is where we have the borderline rule. So if we have a shape there, we have this borderline, and this is what we were going over earlier. And particularly if you can see, easier to see on this, the borderline goes around the figure, around the object on the outside, but it also goes around the inside as well.
Sorry, Lauren, can you hold it a bit higher because it comes just above? Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
There. So it's just seeing the black there. So the borderline is inside. So imagine we have a part of our design is a circle. And we're going to put a borderline on the inside as well as the outside. Same reasoning again as before. At that color transition, we want that flow. We don't want this line of triangles, which if you have with a circle and you're having a line here, then you could have triangles in there as well. And then on the other one, on the outside, you might have triangles there. So borderline is something that you see in any sort of object. There is exceptions to it, as with all the rules. There are certain exceptions which are down to necessity and standard of work as well. Those are the sorts of things that you want to pick up as you look at them, as you see them, as you go through these Roman mosaics. And I think you should have had the guide. I will make sure that's gone through for you both. And that is looking and trying to see in the original mosaics and then seeing these rules in them. So we have that borderline. So now we have those six rules. These are the things to actually see in them. As I mentioned, there is something I call the yeah, but principle. This is where people will say, yeah, but I've seen a mosaic that uses triangles on the curve. Yeah, but there are some mosaics, some figures that don't have the borderline round. These sorts of things are always there. The rules are always there if you know where to look, but there are certain areas, there are certain things that they are an exception to them, or it's just purely down to standard of work. This is the sort of thing that you want to be looking out for. And if you see part of a figure that doesn't have a borderline, that's when you want to ask yourself why and try to understand what they what was their reason for it. So these are the rules. They're very simple. And think of it like this, that as I said, the actual mosaicists themselves were with no education. A lot of them would have been slaves, so they had to have a system that would allow them to create these, that would allow them to teach them, would allow these rules to disseminate across every single mosaic in the Roman world. And they needed a way for them to just be able to apply them, just to do them. This is why we term it as a craft rather than an art. So it wasn't style interpretation inspired by or anything like that. It was these 6 rules they were applied every time. They were applied to the standard of work, and it is this that you need to be seeing when you do it. Now, when you're applying it into your own work, how you apply it is entirely up to you. If you're doing a Roman mosaic, then obviously it needs to have these. But one example where things have changed slightly, if you look around, particularly in the UK, going from the sort of municipal buildings, museums, art galleries that were built around the 1800s, early 1900s, you'll see that quite a few of them have mosaic floors, quite simple ones, quite plain ones, but they were done most probably by Italian craftsmen initially who were classically trained. So they trained on copying, on seeing Roman mosaics, and then they recreated that work. But you will notice that their style differs slightly, that they were not as exact in it. But for the Roman mosaics, you need to actually apply these all the time. You need to understand the exceptions. So let's just have 5 minutes. I'm going to go and get my lead before I die, and then we'll go back. And if you've got any questions on that, now, as I say, I'm extending this off because I'm trying to put too much in. The main thing about this is you see these rules here, you see them on the crib cards, you see them, it's starting to see them in the actual mosaics themselves. Just look at them and try to get a feel of the standard of work. If you were doing them, what things stand out to you? What things do you think could have been done better? Or what does it tell you about the standard of work? And when we come back, just to sort of just 5 minutes, I will tell you about one that very nearly caught me out and was a reminder that we need to be open to what we're seeing all the time and try not to go in with preconceived ideas. So, just 5 minutes. I'm just going to go and get that charger lead, and then we'll crack on for the last bit. I just boom, boom, boom. Okay, we're back on track. The laptop's not going to die on me. Is there any questions so far about that? No.
It really clarifies things for me in terms of
Yeah.
actually, and I really like your directions in terms of to draw the tesserae. is
Yeah.
going in the anti-clockwise direction really helps, because I'm a
That,
rubbish at drawing.
what I was going to bring up, because that was something that I have that one, the drawing sets where I've drawn the mosaics tesserae by tesserae, but not coloured them in, and they do them as these sort of like colouring packs there. But it was, I don't know why I started doing that, but just for and that came up, and that was so apparent, and I still find myself doing it as well. But that one of when you're drawing, if I'm drawing tesserae here. Now I'm starting top left, going clockwise. And what you find is, if you do that a lot, here, top left corner, you'll get a gap. And that's just that way. That's just a way of where we're drawing, particularly where you're drawing a lot. So every so often, I just reverse the drawing, and that solves that. And that to me is really helpful, and it's watching in the same way as you do when you're actually working, is that you don't end up just getting smaller and smaller with them. Now what you're doing with that is you are developing the eye, you're developing your eye for the work, for the side of the work, because as we go back to, it's really important. I want you to see before I want you to do. I want you to see these rules before you're applying them. When they were learning them, I should think they just got on with it and told them to get going. But these, seeing them, then you understand. Then when you're working, and the quickest way to work is drawing them. It just allows you to do so much things so much uh, faster with them. Now, just going back, what I was saying, this was only about, was it last year? Yeah, last year I was doing a demonstration in a museum in Lincoln in the UK. And what they had was very simple mosaic under some glass. And it was just checkerboard fashion. So you had some white squares, need new board, red squares. So basically checkerboard with squares of white tesserae, squares of red, and they were about that sort of, about a foot square, something like that. Now, while I was doing the demonstration there, and I was saying to people, go and look at the mosaic in the room there, and you'll see the borderline. And you'll see that it's quite a simple mosaic, but you'll see this borderline around each one. I felt, quite pleased with myself. That was what I was doing, getting people to get the connection, the way that these rules are used, even in the very basic mosaics. It was on the morning of the last day that I thought, well, I'll just go out and have another look and make sure I haven't missed anything. And what they had that I didn't realize, when you're setting lines, your lines can sometimes drop or they're raised. Your tesserae can be, you'll use some larger ones, and which means the line below you need to compensate by using small ones. So your lines are like that and don't start to drop down. When you remember when you're a kid, writing on the blackboard or whatever they got now, sometimes your lines would start going angling down. It's just, that's what happens. Now with those, again, with the lines dropping down, you'd compress your line enough to lose it. So you do line transition. So you do that where your two lines go into one and carry on, and then the other lines below compensate for it. And what they'd done, they'd used line transition rather than just finish in a triangle where one line gets compressed. They actually used line transition. Now, what really got me was that this was a really simple, basic mosaic. This was just checkerboard pattern. So any of their slaves would have done it, but they took the time to use that line transition rule, which just went to show that however they worked, to whatever standard they worked, they were still using these, they were still applying them. And I came so close to not seeing it. And that showed, that really, for me, cemented this thing about uh, how these rules were everywhere in the mosaic world, in these artisans that they were using it. So it's always a little details like that that make you understand, that make you see um, how important they were, but how important they were that they were done without thought. They were done, and they were done within any standard. Yeah, there are differing standards, but even on that very simple, quite rough mosaic, there definitely weren't a lot of straight lines in there, but they did that. They used that. I will add in this evening the pattern for the snail mosaic, and I'll explain on there why that to me is the single most important Roman mosaic that I've come across, pretty much. And that will be in there, so you can download that, and that will explain it there. Right, we are nearly up for time. Um, any other questions at the moment about this? No, great. Okay. What I didn't want to do, again, it's sort of trying to put in too much. So let's just go over that. Okay. Pebble mosaics in the 5th century BC, created using round pebbles, create soft lines. 3rd century BC, they went from pebbles to using cut stone. The pebble mosaics pretty much faded off. When you are using cut stone, you get them. You get triangle shapes. Triangle shapes aren't inherently bad. You're going to have to use them. So, but used when they're used with against color changes, they can create a distracting, they can create a, visually speaking, a sharp line. This can create a point of focus. So if we go back to that classical architecture of the temples, the Greek temples, and something used by the Romans, the same proportion ratio, pretty much using that. The intention for that was to see the design as a whole, to see the temple as a whole. There would no one part of the building would draw in the eye to the detriment of seeing the building as a whole, seeing the architecture as a whole. My intention is that this was why they had to use this, is why they wanted that visual fluidity with their mosaics to a much less precise degree. The Roman mosaics were very much the poor cousin to things like classical architecture. If you look at the evidence that we have, my view is Roman mosaics were the literal and figurative bottom of the pack of the crafts that they had. They were floors. They were just floors. They were nice looking floors, but they weren't that important. Yes, they would discuss things like in the triclinium, in the eating areas, that you would have the Greek myths showing. They maybe discuss that, but would they just be discussing the artistry of those who made it? I doubt it. Not until you get to the very fine mosaics that are 1 to 2 mil. And that, to me, I won't go into that. That's a different thing altogether. This, where you're looking at a painting in stone. So they had that. They had that need. They had that want for it, which created the rules. These rules expanded and went through every single mosaic that we found in the Roman world. There were very basic rules. There were the 6 rules. We are creating lines. We are creating curves. We can create multiple lines. We can add depth to the surface. And with all those, that means we can create shapes, figures, which means we need the borderline rule to be able to avoid that discordancy in there. We had standards of work. We see differing standards of work, but as I've gone on, as I've said about that mosaic in Lincoln, that even in the very basic mosaics, we are still seeing that they applied those rules because it was something that was seen almost as completely ingrained in them. Those rules, classical andamento is the only area of mosaics that has a specific set of rules to them. Modern mosaics, you can't. Modern mosaics are very hard to criticize because there are no rules to them. But you can apply classical andamento to anything. You can apply it. Where's my in the drawing one? The drawing manual. There's my classical andamento car. So you can do something like that. You can do that shape. You can do that design, and then you can apply. You can be applying classical andamento to that, because what you're doing then by doing that, you're saying is the car is the important thing. What you're trying to show is the important thing. By doing that, the classical andamento, it means that you focus on what you're creating rather than how you're creating it. So you have different aspects of modern mosaics, which can be very much more about the artist. This, using classical andamento, is about what you are showing. This is that you are showing that this car has some symbolism, it has some effect, but it's not you as the artist, it's you as a craftsperson. But, and I won't go into this, I will put this in the group, those 6 rules have artistic effects. So we offset the tesserae, we offset the lines because it adds depth. Depth is an artistic principle. Depth, adding depth, creating depth is something that you would learn if you were taking up painting landscapes, and that you will want to learn how to add depth. So they had these uneducated, they had slaves doing this work, implementing these 6 rules, but the rules had the effect. They created an artistic format. They created artistic effects in their work. Whether they realized that or not, I don't know. So you have a practical set that you can apply, that you can use straight away, but don't think that you're not creating art, because it might not be art per se, but you are using artistic principles. So, unless you have any other questions for the moment, I'll end that there. I'll put the snail one up in the group, the pattern that you can download, and it's got the sheet as to why. And then I will be adding some more. There's a few things that I've gone over that I said I'm not going to go into those. I will be adding those for it for you to look at there. So just going from this, the one thing to look at, I would say, is the museum visitors guide, the Read Roman Mosaics, and I'll check that that's in there as well, because then you can look at the Roman mosaics and you can start to see and start thinking about, like you were saying earlier, I think Helena, wasn't it, that you start to think about the standard that you're seeing. You're starting to think what you getting out of that. There will be the opportunity for more live ones here. But if you have any requests, any questions, anything at all, just please drop them in, because at the end of this, I have the rules, the Making Roman Mosaics, the workbook. But based on these, what we do here, based on any questions you have, I would alter that. So, or add or take things away if they're unnecessary. So what we're doing is literally the reverse. You don't start with the workbook. You end with the workbook, and it's based on that. And there will be some exercises in there as well, other additional patterns to go through. So, like I say, any questions at all, anything. If you've got a question, it means I haven't explained something. So that really helps me. It's taken me 22 years to figure it out, but what people want, the questions are absolute gold to what we do, because you do things for a certain time and you think you've done it all and you think you know it, and you can get caught out a few times. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And
I appreciate you.
Thank you. That was really good. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, if there's anything that stood out that really helped you, if there is anything that didn't help you, and you can put it in a message through to me, and let me know what you think about the sort of like the format of coming into a private group, because this is the Skool.com, the communities here, they're very easy to set up. And if you ever want to set up your own group, you pay $9 a month for the group to set it up. So they're really easy to do. So things like this, it makes it possible to do a sort of pop-up community, for want of a better word, there, where you can have people. So in the main group, the Making Roman Mosaics one, you've got everyone in there. So sometimes sort of questions might get lost. If they're here, if they're related to this, then they will get answered straight away, or as straight away as if I'm on. Okay, great.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Take care. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.